Unspoken Issues.
This is going to be Superman Fantastic Four #1. Chris, why'd you pick it?
Well, initially I had another issue in mind, but I think the initial reason I switched it is because our initial 3 picks were all Marvel published books, and I wanted a DC one just to kind of balance it out. And then Evan also changed his to a DC one, but we did represent both publishers. One of the reasons I think this is a good one to look at also is it's Superman, the first DC superhero, the first superhero really in comics. And the Fantastic Four, which was the superheroes that kicked off the Marvel age. So it's kind of like ground zero for both companies. And even though the Fantastic Four have been surpassed in popularity by a lot of other characters, X-Men or Spider-Man, most of the Avengers at this point, they're still kind of the founding members of the Marvel Universe. I thought it's a good pairing. Plus, this is the only one of these crossovers that was presented initially in a tabloid-sized comic. It's
Right.
longer than most of the others as far as page count. Alex Ross did a really awesome cover where he painted over Dan Juergens' pencils. And yeah, it's Dan Juergens writing and doing the art, or at least the pencil art, which is a pretty perfect guy to bring a Superman crossover together. I don't know that he had done any Fantastic Four stuff, but he had done a lot of Marvel books by this time, so he was familiar enough with the FF.
Yeah. This is early 1999, March 31st, 1999, according to Mike's Amazing World of Comics. This is on the shelves. 64 pages. Cover price was $9.95 based off of that tabloid size, man. It's worth it. So our creative team, written and penciled by Dan Juergens, and you talked about, had he done any other Fantastic Four? And I went to Mike's Amazing World of Comics to take a look. And no, the only time, and now he did some stuff after this, but it's not like he had anything to do with the Fantastic Four at all prior to this. So yeah, he's brand new to the Fantastic Four, which is kind of interesting because we already talked about Green Lantern, Silver Surfer. That was like a team that was made for that. Daredevil and Batman, if you want to maybe make a case for the penciler there having some DC Batman family knowledge, that would have been Scott McDaniel, but D.G. Chichester's not done a lot with Batman as far as I could tell prior to that. But yeah, Dan Juergens, no history with the Fantastic Four, but in the 90s, what other name was more synonymous with Superman than Dan Juergens? Go ahead.
It feels like Dan Juergens should have done some more Fantastic Four.
Right. And I was really surprised, but he was pretty busy, though.
He had done the Superior Spider-Man briefly before he moved, I think, back to DC for a while. But I think in 98 or maybe around, right, maybe it was 99 by the time he launched that Thor book with John Romita Jr., but he was doing more Marvel stuff in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Right. Looking at our inker, though, Art Thibert, I believe is how you pronounce his last name. Art had inked some Fantastic Four, starting with issue 4 from 1998, which if you pull up it's the Hero's Return up at the top. He was inker on that all the way to 2000, up to issue number 34. There is one Superman story that Art and Dan had actually worked together on, and that was Superman issue 57, on shelves in May of 1991 with a story called Return of the Krypton Man. That's kind of like the only time these guys really collaborated when it came to Superman. So it's interesting. This is the team that we've got going on here. Art's got the Fantastic Four kind of knowledge, I guess you would say, while Dan has clearly got the Superman knowledge going into this. Lettered by Bill Oakley, colored by friend of the show, Gregory Wright.
Wait.
Look at that.
Next time, he's been on a couple of times doing interviews. If we do get him, are lucky enough to get him on again, we should probably pick his brain about these Marvel DC crossovers.
I wonder what the industry felt like at that point. What it was like. I think it would be great to get his opinion, or at least his experience doing it. Yeah. I agree 100%.
He was obviously very involved in a lot of these books. So.
Right. So the title of this story is called Infinite Destruction, and Superman Fantastic Four #1. You talked about it being tabloid. I said it was on the shelves March 31st, 1999. Did you see it on the shelves, Chris?
Yeah, I've still got a copy, the same one I bought in 99. It's a little worse for wear, which is unfortunate because this thing is going for like in the $40 to $50 range on eBay right now.
Oh, wow.
But I wouldn't sell it anymore.
Man, I was just thinking how cool it was that I had one. Now I'm thinking about getting back into eBay.
But yeah, I picked it up at the time, and this is another one that when I read it initially, I liked it, but it was a little underwhelming. I don't know that I've even read it again in the man, this thing's 25 years old.
Yeah, dude.
I
Right.
don't think I've read it again since. I've thumbed through it dozens of times. This is probably the first time I've read it again since then, and I enjoyed it more today than I remembered liking it back then for whatever reason.
Mhm. How about you, Evan? You see this thing, pick it up, or
Oh, I just read it for the first time the other day in preparation for this. The reason I have one, my brother got it at some point, and then he left me a lot of his comic stuff as he's moved and gotten into other interests, and he's like, oh, you can have what you want of it. And so that's where I got Green Lantern, Silver Surfer, Superman, Fantastic Four. So I'm not sure. He picked it up at a con somewhere. I don't think it was for very much, but I was like, wait a minute, I've got that somewhere. And sure enough, there it is.
wow, nice, not bad at all. That thing has got to stick out like a sore thumb in the collection.
Yeah, well, it did take me a minute to figure out where I put it, but luckily I found it.
Okay, good.
I had it on a shelf with some other oversized comics and overflow trades.
All right, Chris, I'm going to give you the floor for the synopsis. Go for it.
All right, well, disclaimer, when I was doing the synopsis earlier, I got 2/3 of the way. I can finish this when I get back from playing basketball. I'll have time.
All right, we'll help you out. We'll help you out.
All right, so Superman Fantastic Four. Upon finding a Kryptonian crystal, Superman discovers his home planet was actually destroyed by the planet-devouring monster Galactus. Knowing Galactus resides in the Marvel Universe, Superman uses Access to get him there, where he contacts the Fantastic Four. Before they can investigate further, Superman and the FF are attacked by Cyborg Superman and Galactus, who manages to kidnap Superman. Galactus uses his power and technology to imbue Superman with the power cosmic and enslave him as his herald. Reed Richards attempts to intervene, but is teleported to Galactus' ship along with Superman. Hank Henshaw, hoping to receive the power cosmic for himself, agrees to join Sue, Ben, and Johnny in pursuit of Galactus. They attempt to intercept Galactus and Superman while Galactus feeds on the first planet his new herald has located for him, but are easily bested. Galactus consumes the planet and moves on.
Mm-hmm.
So let me turn to chapter 3. And so yeah, Hank, Ben, Sue, and Johnny continue to pursue. And at this point, Galactus has found a second world to devour because the first one, given that it was a young planet, was not quite sufficient to satiate his hunger, and he wants to destroy this new planet. And Superman's got a problem with that because there are millions, if not billions, of innocent people, or at least creatures and aliens on this planet. So at this point, the Fantastic Four show up and try and attack Superman, which, in a pretty cool maneuver, Superman manages to knock Ben into some of Galactus's machinery and interrupt the process. And at this point, it's obvious that Superman has turned on his master, and together with the Fantastic Four, they manage to reverse the machinery to where if Galactus continues to try and absorb the planet's energy, it's in a feedback loop where it's actually hurting him and draining him of his own essence. And they use that to blackmail Galactus into saying he will no longer attempt to consume planets that are teeming with life. And also Hank Henshaw is defeated.
Yeah, we get a kind of big reveal about how this all starts because Superman is given some kind of data crystal that said that Galactus is the one that devoured Krypton. He's the reason why we were destroyed. Well, we find out that it was Hank Henshaw that intercepted the crystal before it got to Superman and reprogrammed it to actually say that Galactus did that when in fact he didn't. I think Galactus says, I showed up there, but Krypton was already gone before I showed up. So you've been fooled. And Hank Henshaw explains that, yeah, I reprogrammed it before it got to you. Just so we could.
Trying to bait Superman into hooking up with Galactus so he could
right.
follow him. Yes.
Right, but Galactus had known about Superman this whole time, if I remember correctly, and he definitely wanted Superman as his herald. Hank Henshaw starts explaining his origin, and I completely forgot about the Challengers of the Unknown link that is pretty much very, very similar to the Fantastic Four. So I thought that was really cool. Again, we've got Cyborg Superman causing problems. This is obviously later in the year, but after DC versus Marvel Access is being mentioned, which, by the way, that all happens off panel. You don't get to see Superman meet Access and do all his thing. At least I didn't.
It's not. I was kind of disappointed.
I had a feeling. I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all. My goodness, this is a fantastic looking book. It is chock full of double page spreads of the Fantastic Four, of Hank Henshaw doing some shenanigans, of frickin' Harold Superman. That's just insane. Harold Superman, of all things.
Call him Golden Boy.
Cold. Right. Right. I had very few notes on this other than the fact that it's a good story that kind of ties the Fantastic Four and Superman together. Superman obviously respects Reed well enough to know that, hey, there's another guy in a different universe that might be able to figure out my problem here, because Galactus is clearly from the Marvel universe. But
or he just looked at the cover.
He could have just looked at the cover.
They don't actually explain how Galactus was in the DC universe when Krypton was destroyed.
I don't think so.
I think that's kind of left unaddressed.
He can do that.
Okay.
He is Galactus.
Pretty much the same way that Thanos knew everything that Hal Jordan did.
Yeah, good point.
Good point. Everything felt natural. Nothing felt too out of sorts to me. We get to see Sue Richards use her powers to essentially almost nearly the strongest Marvel character out there, non-mutant Marvel character. Superman feels like the Boy Scout. There's nothing off-putting, or it doesn't feel, this is Dan Juergens, he's going to know Superman. My biggest fear was how he was going to handle the Fantastic Four, and everything seemed fine. We got the jovial jabs from Human Torch to the Thing, and that was in there.
Oh yeah, I enjoyed it quite a bit. There was one part that it kind of drew me out of it, where Henshaw kept referring to Galactus as the Big G. It just seemed weird. But who are you going to trust with Hank Henshaw's dialogue, me or Dan Juergens?
Right.
I'll go with Dan Juergens. I thought it was neat the way they made it clear that Superman exists in the Marvel universe as he does in our world as
an
entertainment property. Which, in my mind of overthinking details, I remembered a Fantastic Four issue when I was a kid where it made it very clear that Ben Grimm went to see the Batman Tim Burton movie.
Oh.
So I'm like, see, that this all fits together. It fits with Marvel versus DC, and it fits with Fantastic Four because DC characters exist as movie properties in the Marvel universe.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I love the art. I'm a big fan of Juergens, but with what you guys said, Thibert, because I have always mentally pronounced it Thibert, and I'm pretty sure that's very wrong. But it was neat because this looks familiar, but it said he did the finished art. So maybe I'm wrong. To me, that's a little bit more than inking. It obviously involves inking, but my point is it looks like Juergens, but it also feels a little different. I love the way they did the Thing. There's a lot of different ways to draw the Thing, but this one feels like they really went in and put a lot of detail to it, and I really like the way that they rendered him. The starting point, it's like, okay, who's one of the Fantastic Four's most distinctive villains outside of Doctor Doom? Galactus, the guy that destroys planets. What's Superman's origin? That's like
good.
A perfect crossover waiting to happen, even if it was a bait and switch, like, oh, I totally would have eaten it, but it was already gone. The buffet had closed. That's a perfect starting point to tie those characters together. It does make me wonder if and how it ties in with the Superman Silver Surfer crossover. That was my original choice for this, but like I said, Green Lantern Silver Surfer was close, and then when Chris switched, that let us have 6 different characters. The only guy we doubled up on was Hank Henshaw.
Yeah.
So,
boy, old Hank meets a weird end like he did at what was that? Was it Superman Doomsday, or was it something different where Hank Henshaw gets like? No, it was Superman Doomsday. We covered Superman Doomsday where he hitches a ride on Doomsday's back, and then So Galactus turns him into a red, like, external hard drive or something.
Yeah, that's what it looks
A
like.
flawless alloy condensed into a form of simple perfection.
Probably.
Yeah.
Hank Henshaw getting around into the Marvel universe and causing trouble is, for some reason, I like that. I'm a fan of him. You know what I want to do right now? I'm going to go destroy a planet, and this is going to be fun. Or no, wait a second. I want the power cosmic. Very much Doctor Doom vibes for me. But
Oh yeah, man, that's the crossover we missed out on is Doom and Hank Henshaw.
oh, bring it on.
I mean, really, I can just see Doom yelling Richards and Henshaw shaking his fist, Superman. Man, that's a good one.
All right, Chris, what are your notes, man?
But yeah, like Evan mentioned, Galactus destroying Krypton is kind of a stroke of genius to tie these together. I really like the way Juergens and I guess Thibert make good use of the large scale of this tabloid size.
Yes, absolutely.
The huge panels, some splash pages that have just a couple of panels on there, but really showing large scale action and stuff with this. And I've thumbed through Marvel or DC put out some crossover collections in the early 2000s that had this included. And it definitely has a different look when it's shrunk down to a standard comic book size page. Like you can tell, like, these images are condensed, and you can tell that they're not the way they would have looked initially. And in a way that I think they kind of look neat in those collections. And I'm curious as to how it's going to look in the omnibus if it's included, which I assume it will be. But I like the art for the most part. Franklin looks like a little person. Anytime he shows up. I think we talked about it when Juergens drew young Clark in the Superman Doomsday book. Sometimes he looked...
I remember that now.
He just can't draw a kid's face for some reason.
He cannot draw kids.
Yeah,
he does. Looks like a wee tiny little adult man.
I mean, we're not talking like John Byrne level.
Oh,
I love Ben chomping at the bit to knock Cyborg's block off pretty much from the first time he sees him. Eventually it pays off. I think the only two-page splash might be the Fantastic Five, where we get Superman joining the FF for a big moment together. Johnny does say something about how it wouldn't be hard to replace that S with a 5.
Oh, okay.
One little nitpick, the idea that, and obviously these are all made-up characters and none of it's real, but the idea that Sue's force field could slow Galactus down is laughable. Like,
what?
Like, even she's like, I think it's pretty much common knowledge or commonly accepted that Sue is the most powerful member of the team, and like she's super like the force fields and everything makes her super powerful. But like the idea that she could stop Galactus from using his machine with one of her force fields, like that seems ridiculous.
Oh, now come on. She can throw a thin. All she has to do is just stop them two things from making contact, and that's all. It's just like if you were messing with something, you couldn't figure out why won't this thing plug into the wall? Oh, it's because I got the plastic things on the end of the...
She just made it but invisible.
Sure.
Galactus had been forced to eat a planet that didn't have life on it, so he was probably still a little hungry.
Well, he might have... Sugar might have went low.
But what he really needed was just a planet full of nuts. Right, Jesse?
Oh, that sounds like a Squirrel Girl thing.
We did that one too.
Yeah, you'll have to remind me.
That was in the one we did where Squirrel Girl convinced Galactus to find another planet to eat, and it was one full of nutritious nuts. And
that's
so
right.
She and Tippy Toe also partook.
That is right. I remember them being engorged, their bellies full after eating that. That was great.
The last thing I've got, I guess, is this could have been a 3-issue miniseries. And it's divided into 3 chapters. All chapters are around 21 pages. I do kind of wonder if maybe the intention was to release this as the tabloid and then maybe do a 3-issue miniseries later, and that never happened or something. But I did think it was interesting that they kind of divided those 3 chapters neatly into what would have been a standard comic book page count.
What a throwback to having chapters in a big story too. You don't see that very often. It's done, but it feels like it's kind of like one of those like, hey, we've got our Golden Age superhero teaming up with what was heroes in the Silver Age. Silver Age, right, was fantastic. They say it was Fantastic Four #1 for Marvel, right? So it felt like one of those old timey stories, in my opinion. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I mentioned that I didn't love this as much the first time I read it when I was younger and it first came out. I think maybe one of the drawbacks to me then that I don't care as much about now is like we never got the classic Superman versus the Fantastic Four before they decided to team up. We do see Golden Boy Superman fight with him a little bit. But like
ain't much of a fight though. Like Johnny gets knocked out,
especially when he's all juiced up with the power cosmic.
Right, dude.
But yeah, we never got to see Ben throw hands with Superman or any of that stuff. So that's probably one of the drawbacks from back then. But I really liked revisiting this. I thought it was really good.
Okay. Go ahead and let's get into picking a panel. So you have first pick there, Chris Armstrong.
There's a lot of good ones to pick from. I think I'm going to go page 53 when we finally get a clobber in time and Ben puts some rock leather on old Hank.
I love how he hits him and he's like, I finally got to say it without getting interrupted. Oh, that's good stuff. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a nice page too, man. That's huge. All right, Evan Bevins, pick a panel.
I'm going strictly Marvel on here. I know I should do one with Superman in it too. But when we first see the thing where Franklin runs in and the thing's holding up that hydraulic press, I just love the way the thing's drawn in there and him interacting with Franklin. He was just talking to him about
the
show he was watching, but just that big, almost like Herbie-esque hydraulic press, doing whatever crazy experiment Reed has him doing and stopping to talk to Franklin there. And you don't see Franklin's face, so he does look like a kid. I really love the way they draw the thing in this.
Yeah, that's a good pick. There are a lot of great 2-page spreads in this thing. One of them of just the whole team flying out. It's the Fantastic Four and Superman 2-page spread. Them just coming out. That looks great, but I'm not going with it. Instead, I'm going with Little Baby Man at the very end. It's a great way to end this, where Franklin is just so enamored with his hero of his, Superman, and he just talking to his mom, who he never got to meet him. He just gets to hear it from his mom, who says, yeah, he's real. He's an actual person. And it's like watching your heroes come to life when Superman shows up in your world. And at the very end, he talks about like how this doll that Franklin ended up giving his mom or something. And it's kind of like what turned the tide of the battle is Superman seeing this doll, and he started realizing who he was, and he kind of shakes the whole power cosmic thing off. But he talks to Franklin, and he's like, let me give you something to remember me by. And he takes his freaking cape off and gives it to Franklin Richards, which is just freaking awesome. As Dare Marvel's first family watches Superman fly off, and he's back to head to the DC universe. Great ending panel. I would love to know if that ever went up for sale, like that page, like how much it would go for, because this doesn't happen very often. People can draw whatever they want to draw, but stuff that got published is one of a kind. Good stuff, very good stuff all the way around. We did it. We put in some time on this one. Let's go ahead. We will get into plugs. So, Chris Armstrong, I'm going to let you go first here, man. What do you got going on over in your neck of the woods?
I got a podcast I do with my buddy AJ called Small Screeners, where we talk about direct-to-video and made-for-TV movies. I'm not sure when this is going to drop, so probably going to be an episode about Duel, the Steven Spielberg made-for-TV movie from the 70s, or possibly on Six String Samurai, a really low-budget, wacky kind of kung fu post-apocalyptic rock and roll movie from the late 90s. So just check it out on the Small Screeners feed on your podcatcher of choice.
All right. Very good. Okay. Evan Bevins, tell them all about Asterisk 51 and anything else you got going on.
Over at asterisk51.blogspot.com. I am actually working through the sandwich portion of the Marvel and DC crossover heyday when they all got mixed together in amalgam. Just did one by the Chichester and McDaniel creative team on Assassins. Also had Captain America mixed with Superman, Batman mixed with Wolverine, multiple Jimmy Olsen amalgams for some reason, and all sorts of craziness. I also go through the movies I've found at Dollar Tree and watched. #Dollar Tree Cinema. I like to dig through the stacks of free comic books I've acquired over the years to justify keeping them, so it's not technically hoarding. Then you can also listen to Jesse and I on this channel do Snap material about the mobile Marvel card game, Marvel Snap, where we try our hand at giving you strategies and also pointing out which card combinations have never actually happened in the comics.
That's right. We throw them curveballs all the time, making up alternative Marvel history where team-ups definitely did not happen. Listen, folks, you're listening to the Source Material Comics feed right now on this podcast, which is Unspoken Issues. You understand, we talk about 90s comics. We've got all sorts of other episodes, over 100 episodes. Chris and I started this thing out with our episode 0, and then you can hear us talk about Prototype #1. That was our first ever. Yeah, it was our first ever. Good luck finding it, because it might be buried in some YouTube stuff, but you can find it, I guarantee you. Also, the Source Material Comics podcast right here, where we talk comics of any era on here. You can check that out. We've recently talked about Gargoyles, the first 6 issues of Here in Manhattan. So if you're a Gargoyles fan, give that a listen. And then, of course, Evan already talked about Marvel Snap material. I'll go ahead and throw in an episode that I did with Mark Radulich, where we are creating the Radulich in Broadcasting Network album using AI song generation. And yeah, that's a weird concept. You can watch Mark and I about once a month. We're going to sit down and hash out some kind of a song that depicts some kind of weird moment or phrase or saying that has appeared on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network. He's been podcasting for over 10 years, probably 15 years. So there's a lot of stuff to pull from and make up silly songs with. And we already did our first one, which was titled More Dinosaurs. And it is a lament as to why Hollywood makes decisions about just throwing in more stuff that doesn't need to be necessarily in there in the movies. So check that out.
I thought it was a lament that there weren't enough dinosaurs.
All right, that's it. Out of here. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us. Unspoken Issues is part of the UnspokenDecade.com, the home for 90s comics, blogs, and podcasts. Unspoken Issues also has a Facebook group you can join if you are interested. Just search the Unspoken Issues podcast and request to join. All of this would not be possible without W2Mnet.com, so make sure to seek them out for more podcasts. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please feel free to share, and we look forward to entertaining you again soon.